Welcome to World Builders Anonymous. Kick that world building addiction and actually finish that novel with your hosts Vito and John.
Okay. How are we going to start out today?
Huh? I don't know. I don't have a brain today. Welcome to the CarCast, everyone.
I guess we're in it now. Here we go.
That's the most energy I can summon for an intro today.
Welcome back,
My brain is
everyone,
a pile of
to
mush.
the show where John sits in his car and talks about things for a little bit and then goes back to typing on computers. For a
And
little
then
bit,
goes back inside where I type on a computer
where
again.
he programs the AI that's going to take over the world. Is that what you do at your job,
AI's not
John?
going to take over the world. AI is not going to take over the world.
Well, that's
Elon
what you would
Musk is lying
say.
to you.
That's what you would say if you were programming an evil AI to take over the world, isn't it?
I can neither confirm nor deny.
Well, that's something at least. Okay, cool. Anyway, yes.
Anyway.
We're going to talk for a little bit before John goes back to work about a few things.
I like the idea that this is just like, we're just going to talk for a while between,
just
on my lunch break. That's
have a
just
little
all
chat.
we're going to do.
Yeah, totally. No, we did plan out
Okay.
a few things for today that we are not just doing this completely free form. We're going to talk a little bit about our progress of the last week, a couple things we might have learned from it, and then we want to tackle a listener submission and talk a little bit.
Whoa,
Cut
man.
that out. Cut that out in editing.
Oh, jeez.
Cut that
Fix it in
out in
post.
editing. Fix it in post. We're going to talk a little bit about a listener submitted story that someone very kindly sent us and allowed us to talk about on the podcast. We're going to point out some positives and maybe some things that can be worked on to make it even more effective going forward. So yeah, it's going to be a fun time. John, did you have
Let's do
any? I was going to say, did you have any fun writing this week? That's not the most productive question, but did
I
you?
had lots of fun.
I know, yeah. Did you have a productive week of writing?
I did have a productive week of writing. I'm still trying to wake up extra early in the morning to get writing time in. And that's been a good thing for me because otherwise I just, I don't have time. So I've written probably like 5,000-ish words in the last week. Just pushing through, writing a new chapter and putting in new ideas and trying to progress the story. And actually, I opened up my Kindle that I haven't looked at in a while, and I forgot that I had written out some notes for another story. Like I just typed up some like world building elements that I came up with, and I'd 100% forgotten about them. And I was reading them. I'm like, ooh, I'm gonna just put that in my story now. That's what this is now. I'm just gonna steal my own ideas.
Yep.
Which is nice. It one of those things where I forgot so much that I'd written them that it felt like I was just reading something new.
Totally, yeah.
Oh, that's a good idea. I'm smarter than I thought I was.
Yeah, a little while ago I looked up some ideas I had from like 10 years ago or something, and most of them are crap, but there was some interesting stuff for sure. But
Sometimes this one, it's okay.
it's often dangerous though, because I'll see those and I'll be like, oh, that was a great idea. I'm like at a dead end, or I've got writer's block for this idea I'm working on right now. I'll just go over and do that. And then, of course, that
man.
inevitably leads nowhere, and then I go back to my other thing, and I'm in the same spot I was, and it can be a dangerous diversion sometimes, for sure. But sometimes it can be a good thing to incorporate into the idea you had, and maybe it'll be this puzzle piece you find that fits right into the spot that you needed it to, and that kind of thing. So it just depends.
Yeah. Well, I had a teachable moment this week for myself as well. So on Friday, on Friday, like a week ago, I sat down to write in the morning and didn't get it. Like I wasn't liking what I was writing, and I wasn't sure of what the progression of events was that was going to happen next. I knew vaguely what I wanted to happen, but I didn't know how it was all going to fit together. Like I knew that Darren needed to go out into the city with Warren to practice being a thief, because he's never done that before, and he's kind of joining this little band of merry thieves. And simultaneously, I needed to advance the plot, because we've kind of gone on a sidetrack for a bit with Darren finding his feet, but we need to get back to him looking for his friends. And I wasn't sure how I wanted to do that, and I was trying to keep just straight up discovery writing 100% for that section, and I just realized for myself that I needed to go back a little bit. Not go back. I needed to step back and figure out what needed to happen to make everything go together. So over the weekend, I didn't even try to write anything. I just took some time over the weekend to brain through what the progression of events to happen next. And I wrote out some notes for myself. And then on Monday I came back and it was all figured out. I just had to write it. It was a really good experience for me because to this point I've almost exclusively Discovery written. I just sat down and said, okay, I'm just going to write, and what happens next happens next. And I think that's good for me because I need that kind of just attitude of just sitting down and writing. But I found myself in a place where I needed to step back and plan a little bit, and I did, and it worked. So I like this kind of combination of Discovery writing with some, limited plotting when the need arises. And I think that's a good bit of advice for people who are Discovery writing, that just because you're Discovery writing doesn't mean you can't step back and make a little bit of a plan for what happens next directly, just so you have a little bit of structure for yourself to follow as you move forward.
Yeah, that seems to be the best approach for me, too, so far. Although I've been on a kick where I've not really been writing scenes or prose. I've been summarizing and kind of planning the next few stages of the story, I guess. Because I've had so many different ideas that they all get jumbled together. And if I'm just Discovery writing at this point, I'm confusing them all together and adding random bits of one or the other into it and getting confused. So it's been really helpful to take a step back and actually go through. I have a template of like 32. I think we talked about it in a way earlier episode. I think it's like 32 or 29. I can't remember how many plot points. But it's like, the basically just outlines the rising action and different, stages of the traditional story arc. And I've been filling in those gaps with different scenes that I want to happen that aren't necessarily the only scenes that'll be in there, but they're the pivotal ones that the whole thing kind of rotates around. And that's been helpful. I've got like a third of it basically planned out at this point, which is really nice. I've not had that much success plotting pretty much ever. Because I'm really good at thinking of beginnings, but I'm very bad at thinking about where the story's going after the original, like, interesting idea I had for the beginning of a story. And that's usually what happens to me. I don't have many ideas for overall story arcs. I have a lot of interesting ideas for, like, oh man, what if this happened in this interesting situation that could kick off a story and, be this really great jumping off point for, these cool events to happen, but I don't know what those events are. I just know what the first one is. And so yeah, I'm getting a more clear idea of what that is, and filling in some of those points. That was what I pretty much did exclusively this week. So I'm thinking I'll probably finish this third of the story plot-wise, and then go back and maybe write it and see if I'm pulled in any interesting directions while I'm writing it. Maybe that informs kind of what comes next, because I have a rough idea. So I'm also planning to mix the plotting and Discovery methods a little bit as well.
Yeah. Do you kind of plan on building off of what you've written already, or are you kind of starting over with the idea?
No, I'm definitely like I can't even remember which one was the last version you saw, but I'm pretty sure it's that. I've definitely made some tweaks. And I still might even make more tweaks, because I've just the other day I was tooling around with the idea of starting farther back in the story, because when we open at this point in this version of the story, there's a lot that's already happened. Like, their dad's already been exiled, their sister's captured because one of the brothers dodged the draft, and in punishment they basically tried to take him, but he escaped, but the other members of his family didn't. He and his brother escaped, though, and so they're on this whole different island now, trying to just make a living. And then sort of things happen and jumpstart the story. But I'm tooling around with the idea of going back and showing us how all that happened, just because my instinct is always to start in media res, like in the middle of an ongoing story, just because I think that's more interesting, and I don't really know how to start it otherwise sometimes. Like, where do you start if not, like, after some events have already happened to get you where you are? And the obvious answer is at some baseline, like normal life for the character. But that's hard for me to think of sometimes. So I was playing with that idea. We'll see if I end up doing it. But that's something I could easily go back and do after I write the rest of the story. So we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, beginnings are fun because you, like you said, you can always go back and kind of change where the story started from, because at one point whatever beginning you have merges with the rest of your story, and you can just keep going from there.
Yeah, hopefully.
It's kind of modular.
Yeah. And it shouldn't be completely modular, but I think that's what probably I'll end up doing in the second draft or sort of revisions is go back and knit those sections together with like a bit of foreshadowing here or a bit of a callback there and sort of relate the different sections to each other, even though they were kind of written separately, you know?
Yeah, and I think you can do that pretty effectively. Yeah, I don't think it would make a huge difference in most cases, like the particular way the story started, because most of the elements are going to come together anyway.
Yeah, definitely, and I'm realizing that even with just plotting, because I'm writing on basically in Scrivener, there's different little cards you can write on essentially in this big long list. So it's from top to bottom the sequence of events, and as I come up with a new idea, I'll add another little card with the same like title essentially as the one before it, but with modification or something next to the title. Like this is a modification of that idea I had based on a new idea I had for something later on or whatever it is. So I'm coming up with my system as well, so that's been nice.
Yeah. So progress all around, and man, I always forget when I'm not writing how slow it feels sometimes, like the progress you make. Like I sit down to write, and I write, in a week, several thousand words, and I look back and go, oh, I'm still 80,000 words away from my goal. Oh, boy.
Yeah, for sure. Do you still feel like the drive of this particular story? Does it feel still like it's feels special to you and like something you want to tell? Or does it now feel like an idea that you've kind of gotten stuck with? And I mean, I'm sure there's always back and forth with that, but where are you with that?
I do still feel the drive to write the story. The problem that I'm running into is that I've read and thought about what's happened so far in my story so many times that it doesn't feel interesting to me anymore.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
And so I have this doubt in my mind that what I've written so far is good enough to warrant continuing to write sometimes.
Yeah.
I think it is, because I go back to the way I felt about it when I wrote it the first time, went, oh, this is, I was, feeling pretty confident about it. It's just that now I've seen it so much. And I think that's a pretty common thing for writers to experience. And you kind of have to just have the confidence that you are good at what you're doing. The story does work. You just need to keep going with it. And I'm excited for the places that I know the story's going. There's some emotional beats that I'm really excited to hit eventually. Those are some ways off in a lot of cases. And it can be hard to maintain the drive when the moments you're really excited about are some ways off still.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to make the story more interesting in the present for myself.
Yeah, it's hard when you have like,
ways.
yeah, for sure. Like I felt the same way reading some stories growing up. Like I would just skip to where I'd flip forward to see where like the two characters who were, hadn't gotten into a relationship yet, but they were kind of flirting with it. And I wanted to see when they're next both together or something like that, because they just like had to go in separate directions for this mission or something.
Right.
And I wouldn't skip, but I'd be like, oh man, I have 30 more pages to read till I get to that interesting thing again. Crap.
Yeah.
So that can feel the same way writing sometimes, where you're like, oh, I just want to write this scene, and I don't want to write all the boring things that come between. But maybe that's kind of a bad way to look at it, of course, because if you think it's boring, then it's probably going to be boring.
Right.
I'm not sure what to do about that.
And that's what I'm trying to spice it up a little bit. I'm adding in like a sort of a heist scene coming up soon.
Mm-hmm.
I think that'll be fun, and it's gonna cause a few characters to cross paths and do a few things at once.
Did you have the idea
have
because
some kind of excitement?
were you like, oh, these characters need to cross paths, how do I make that happen? Or were you like, ooh, I think a heist would be cool, oh, and I can use it to like fill this function,
More the second one, but I actually had a dream about that I was in a team doing some kind of heist in a medieval castle.
Wow, your dreams are way more interesting than mine.
Well, mine are there are details to it that are so bizarre that I don't even know how to talk about them. Like, my dreams always have at least one element that is so mind-bogglingly stupid that I don't even know what it is. But the fundamentals of it were that I was a part of this like team conducting this like super secret espionage type heist on this castle during some kind of ball. And I was like, that's cool. I think I can write that. I can write something like that's along those same lines. And then I thought that is an awfully convenient way for me to cause some characters to cross paths as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I do struggle sometimes with the idea of when is something... So there's coincidence, right? And then there's coincidence. I mean, the fact that there's a story means that there's stuff happening. And some of that is bound to be stuff that's not necessarily the most likely. But I mean, your characters are together in the story for a reason, and that reason is that they're connected in some way. And so, two characters that don't really share worlds interacting in some way in like a ball,
Yeah.
is it coincidence? Is it too much? Is it it's hard for me to find that line as well. But
Yeah, I mean,
I'm going to do it and see how it feels.
I mean, technically, everything that happens is a coincidence, I think where it becomes a problem is whether it's expected or not, or I guess whether an event is expected or not, or maybe needed or not. Like if something needs to happen for something else to happen, and that thing in the middle happens by coincidence, then the thing that happens because of that coincidence doesn't feel earned or satisfying, maybe. But
That makes sense.
if you're relying on it to get to that third point, perhaps maybe it's a little bit more acceptable. I don't know. That's just kind of off the top of my head kind of instinct to that.
I think it will depend a little bit just on feeling. Like I write it, and if it seems reasonable, then we can accept it. And if it feels like, this is too much, you have to be critical about that kind of thing, probably.
Well, also like if you have certain characters that are thieves and certain characters that are, reside in the, palace or whatever, the place that's getting robbed, then it would logically make sense that if the thieves rob the palace, then they might cross paths, that kind of thing. So it depends on how set up it is too, I guess.
Yeah. When it kind of traces back to one of our points from our last week's top 10 beginner writing tips where things have to be reasoned. Like you have to have a good why for everything that happens. Like if they cross paths because, there are thieves and people who live where things are stolen, then it makes sense they're crossing paths there. That's a good reason for it to happen, and so it will be accepted. But if it was a worse reason, it wouldn't quite
your
make
two
as much
characters
sense.
just running into each other in the street, even though they're from completely different social classes and probably wouldn't be in the same part of town and that kind of thing. That might be not as satisfying.
Right, that would be a little bit less believable.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, it's hard to know how to go about accomplishing those like sort of plot points in a satisfying way without making it exposing the what's behind the scenes almost, taking the reader out of the story and having them see kind of what you're trying to do as the author, in trying to accomplish this plot point as opposed to it feeling immersive and natural in its flow. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh boy.
Still trying.
Do you have anything else for kind of your recap for the week?
Not really. Just that I'm finding success in just keeping going. Kind of like another thing we talked about last week in your top 10. Just kind of trying to put words down, even if it's not perfect, and even if I think I'll probably change a little thing here or there later, or whatever. I'm realizing too more and more where it's okay to go back and add more to a spot, because I kind of know where I want to get because of that plot point, as opposed to parts where I don't know what comes next, and so I'm just stuck, Yeah, so I'm getting better at recognizing those and being okay with going around or not being as fleshed out in some areas with some plot points. So yeah, it's been good.
I'm doing that a little bit as well, where I've written the current chapter I've written. I don't think is as high a quality as the rest of the book is, but I'm okay with that right now. I'm trying to be okay with it and just move on past it, because it's better to write the story than to make everything perfect. I think the ideas that I did were the right ideas. I don't think I executed them perfectly, but I can fix the execution later.
Yeah, totally. Which actually leads us pretty well into talking about our listener submitted story that we're going to talk about today, of which I only saw the first page and John saw.
Yeah,
a
unfortunately,
bit
so Michael Morford sent us his work in progress, and I had the whole thing and I read a few chapters of it, but then I tried to go back to review it for this podcast, and the Google Doc is locked, so I can't get into it. So we only have the first page in front of us, so we're going to comment on that mostly. I have a couple comments on the second chapter that we don't have in front of us, so Michael, forgive me if I flub something up. I can't look at it right now.
And also, of course,
Yeah.
it goes without saying that these are all our subjective sort of thoughts upon first reading it, and that we are not by any means the best at the concepts we're going to be talking about either. And there are some definitely good things and some things that can be improved. So we're just trying to help the improvement process, just like anyone else would for us, hopefully.
Yes. So Vito, why don't you get started with that?
Yeah, so like I said, I only saw the first page really, and I really liked a lot of the elements in it. Like there's just a lot there, which is part of the problem, but also part of what I liked about it. But yeah, it starts out with this young woman sitting in an office of some sort at a desk, and with each sentence in the first paragraph of the chapter, we're hit with another world building element. There's she's sitting at an ebony desk, which makes it seem like she's pretty fancy. Okay, cool. It's very hot outside. She's got a fan made of owl feathers that the emperor gave her. Okay, interesting. There's an emperor. She knows the emperor. Interesting. And there's monkeys outside her window. That's weird and interesting and new. Okay. She ordered her soldiers to cut down the trees the monkeys were in because they were annoying her, but they didn't do it yet. She's very upset about that. Okay. She has a crystal ball with water in it that she tries to freeze with her mind, and she has magic powers. Oh man, there's so much happening and then a guy comes in with a letter, and it's just a lot of stuff right off the bat. And it made me think of just character introductions or beginnings of stories. And I assume this is the first page of the first chapter because it's the only one that I had access to. But it just made me think about how it's probably better to establish character before setting, kind of like we talked about last week. Instead of hitting us with all these back-to-back world-building elements without really any character, attachments to them, except for what she's thinking to herself in this room all by herself, just kind of hanging out, it might be better to show her doing something that shows us a little bit about her character, a little bit about her role in this world, in the situation she's in at the beginning, establish a baseline for us, and we can sprinkle in all these world-building elements later. We don't need to know everything right off the bat in sort of this rapid-fire way. They're all interesting, though, and I would like to see them, I guess, stretched out more. As John said earlier, we need fewer things, but more of the things that are there. So, there's some interesting stuff, but it's cluttered right now. So it's a case where I would pick one element to introduce us to, maybe the crystal ball that she's using to practice her magic, and show us in her reaction to failing at the sort of exercise she's doing, how she reacts emotionally to that, and really draw that out, or something else, some other element. Pick one and really focus on that for the entirety of that scene.
To give a few examples of what that looks like, so one of the first things that happens is it says she cools herself with a fan of owl feathers that the emperor gave her. That's seen. So if you're dropping that little tidbit, dropping the owl feather fan specifically that the emperor gave her, I want to know more. A little. I want to know what the connection there is. Who is she? Why does she have a fan from the emperor? That seems like a bigger thing, and we get it and jump straight over it. And it says actually.
Yeah, go ahead.
She says, we're gifted the fan by the emperor himself, and thinking about that took her mind elsewhere. But right after we say it took her mind elsewhere, it says the moment was interrupted by the monkeys. Mm-hmm. Where's the elsewhere? What is that? I want more of that moment that she's having, because when it comes and goes like that, we don't actually feel like we connect to it at all. It just is a thing that was there.
And it's interesting. It was a good setup. Right, just like you said.
Oh yeah, I think it's a great setup.
It's super hot outside. She's fanning herself at her desk, annoyed by the heat, with this fan the emperor gave her. Oh, that's interesting. Let's elaborate. And that's a good way to introduce that. She knows the emperor. It's a natural sort of progression of it's hot. She's got her fan. It makes her think of the emperor, who she knows. Let's have a little moment of expanding upon that a little bit, or not expanding upon it necessarily, but not just jumping right into something completely different that raises a whole other series of questions that we have, instead of sort of, like I said before, focusing on the one element and drawing that out in the scene, asking a question and then asking a completely different question before we have any answers or even, any expounding upon the original question.
Yeah, and the next thing that happens is you got these monkeys, and then she's like, "Man, I really
These freaking monkeys,
I told
man."
my freaking monkeys." She's like, why haven't my soldiers cut down these trees like I told them to?" Well, that's a great question. Why haven't they?
Are
You know,
they habitually
you can
negligent in their duties? Are they,
Yeah, or maybe I don't know anything about beyond this first page for the sake of this argument. But let's just imagine that she's the lady of the house, and her husband is like the one who's really in charge, quote unquote, of the estate, and the soldiers are really only loyal to him. So like she told them to cut down the trees, and they didn't really listen to her. She's like, "Oh, they never listened to me." You can
that tells you something about
get
her
into
situation, yeah.
Getting into that tells you more about her and lets you connect more to her as a character. But in this case, why have my soldiers not cut down the trees like I told them to? She pounded her fist in frustration, and then the next sentence is, and then she looked at something else. And then the
that
moment's
introduces the magic that she has apparently, and some
Right.
sort of academy she mentions in her thoughts. And she tries to freeze the water in the glass and fails. Apparently, she's not a very good magician. And that whole section again by itself, it's like the third section of stuff that is raising more questions. And yet we still don't get any answers for it until maybe
yeah.
later on in the story. But by then we aren't thinking of it anymore. So it's kind of
And-
confusing. Yeah.
Each of these by themselves, like we said, are good setups. I'm interested
totally.
in each of them. I'm interested in, this magic system, and why is, she expresses frustration at the fact that there are magicians half her age who are more competent than she is. Why is that the case? And clearly, if she's frustrated about it seems like she feels like she should be able to do better. So why can't she? And what is her history there? Did she get kicked out of the academy early? What's the deal with it? These are each interesting things that I want to know more about. But in the story as it is right now, and Michael told us this is a very much a first draft. We're missing those details. We're missing the fullness of explanation for each of these different points that would give us more connection. And to be clear, I'm not saying that you should, in this beginning section, go fully into each of these things. I think you shouldn't introduce all of them until you're ready to explain and go deeper into them, so we can connect with the character through that moment.
Or just dwell on it a little bit more and connect it to something character related that she's doing, or show us something about who she is or what she wants or what she believes in, and kind of that sort of thing, instead of just sort of the elements by themselves and her thinking about them randomly as she looks around the room,
Yeah. Did you have more on it?
Not particularly. Like, it's an intrigue. Later on in this first page, there's someone who comes in with a letter from I can't remember. Is it the Emperor or somebody? I can't remember.
No, I don't know.
From somebody important, and that was an interesting mystery. And then that page ended, and I was like, oh man, I actually want to see what they had to say, but that's all I had access to. But so it was good. There was some interesting, sort of intriguing stuff in it. I just felt like it should be expanded upon more, and the good stuff that's there needs to be focused on, so that each individual bit of it can be sort of appreciated more by the reader. Yeah.
I do have an example of showing over telling, to nitpick here, and I actually talked to Michael about this already, and he said, "Yeah, I want to change that and make it better." So this emissary comes in, and his only description is that he's a tall, dark-skinned man in a burgundy tunic with gold trim. That's the description of him we get. And then, I actually kind of want to see what you think about this. So then he introduces himself, and then it says, Luis took one look and was awestruck by the man's stunning figure. I don't like that sentence.
Yeah, I had the same reaction.
I think I have not convinced myself that his figure, this man is a stunning figure. I don't know why she thinks that. What is her... I don't care if she thinks he's a stunning figure. That's totally fine. But I want to know why she thinks that, and I just need to know more than that. The statement is not enough. I need to be shown
It's a bit too
what
abstract,
that is, not
concrete
told
enough.
that it's the truth.
Yeah, I had the same reaction. I think easy fix. I mean, just
Easy fix.
Just tell us what she sees rather than what she thinks because of what she sees.
Right.
Yeah.
Show
or
us what
in
he
addition
looks
to,
like.
perhaps. Yeah.
Yeah, show us what she's seeing, and then you can say she was awestruck, and we'll go, Okay, sure.
Because that's a pretty strong reaction to have when you see somebody
Exactly.
for the first time, and it needs to be kind of justified. It also calls attention to itself and makes us think that this is going to be something significant going forward. So if this guy isn't, something significant in the story relating to her going forward, I don't think that description should even be there. If he's just sort of this guy who's delivering a message, we don't need that sort of attention called to him. But if he is, then we need to know why she has that reaction as well. So you're
Yeah.
sending a signal either way.
Yeah. So, for the first chapter, really good ideas and good setups for things. It just feels like the next step of those setups is missing. That's the main problem.
Kind of
in
relates
my
to our top 10 list again last week in the one where you talked about, I can't remember what you called it specifically, but you were talking about how don't just try to get to the emotional high moments without the setup. And I think the same applies to world building elements sometimes. Like, don't just try to get to the reveal of like a cool element of this world or a cool element of the character, a cool element of whatever it is that you had a great idea for. Sprinkle it in, like establish the framework in which it sits so that when you find out about it, it can sort of shine on its own and not be cluttered with everything else going on.
Yeah, right. So that's kind of it for the first. Again, all we have here to look at in front of us is the first page. Because he sent it to us individually, apart from the rest of it. But I do want to talk about something in the second chapter that took me out of the reading. And again, we can't reference it. I can't look at it and read any of it to you because I don't have it in front of me. So Michael, forgive me for any errors in my recollection. But it's a different character in the second chapter. I prefer that when you have multiple perspective characters, you give us at least a couple chapters with each of them to begin with, so we can get a closer connection. But that's my own personal preference.
Also, first draft, fair enough. Yeah,
first draft, that's fine. So the second chapter's over another character who's kind of a young boy. He aspires to be, I can't remember. It's not a dragon rider. It's like a dragon friend or something, like a dragon communicator. Or maybe it is a dragon rider.
I'm just imagining a little
certain.
kid going like, someday I want to be a dragon's friend.
It's a better explanation and
I'm sure,
goal
I'm
in the
sure.
story than I'm referencing it to be, so I apologize. But anyway, he is like apparently scored higher on like I think the test is called the Dragon Affinity Test. And he scored like higher than anyone else in history. So that's kind of his deal. He's the Dragon Affinity guy.
Dragon Affinity. Okay, cool.
Affinity with an A.
Okay.
So he, after a couple things happen to him in the very beginning of the chapter, he enters this city, and he's never been to the city before, and basically the first thing that happens when he gets into the city is he's met by this dwarf, who is immediately very friendly to him, offers him, says, hey, I'll take you on a guided tour of the city, and takes him around and shows him everything, and afterward invites him over to the inn that this dwarf owns, and then invites him to stay there for free, and gives him food, and all this stuff. And it was so much convenience for the character that I started to think that he was setting up for a trap of some kind, because it seemed impossible to me that there was someone being this kind for absolutely no reason in a strange city.
Like
maybe, and it didn't turn out to be the case.
Like maybe he would reverse it and dump him in an alley somewhere and take his wallet.
Exactly. That's kind of what I was waiting for, is he would in this tour lure him to a remote area and then kill him and take his stuff. That's kind of
and the story's over.
And then that's it. Yeah, the chapter's over and no more of that character.
It's just a random kid who gets mugged and killed. Oh no.
Brandon Sanderson does that kind of thing sometimes.
He actually does. That's true.
Little one-off chapters with no context.
I don't honestly care for those. Yeah.
I don't understand them. I think they play into his Cosmere universe thing, but I don't understand it.
Not that that's what's happening here, but tangent. But yeah.
No, anyway, tangent. But the niceness of this character, to me, as the reader, was never justified. And so I felt either something was wrong. Actually, I would have really liked it if he ended up being a bad guy and knocking him out and taking his wallet. I think that would have been a really fun way to sort of subvert expectations.
And show you that this character is trusting and kind of naive and establish
and
how
the city's dangerous. It gives you a lot of information. but it didn't happen, and it ended up being just a thing. And man, this dwarf spouts exposition like you would not believe. Like, he's telling stories about the history of the city, and he is telling us what everything is, and it feels like the role of this character in the chapter is to explain stuff to the audience and give the character everything that he needs. And I had a really hard time reading through it because of that. And there's a couple ways to fix it. And the main one is one of the tips that I gave last week, and it's the one that we talked about earlier today as well, where everything needs to be reasoned well. And that reason needs to be understood by the reader in most cases. So why is this guy being so nice? Why is he giving him this tour? We need to know that within enough time that we don't start to check out because it doesn't make any sense. We need to know, what's going on. And if you can't adequately explain why he's being so nice, then he shouldn't be being so nice.
Because it depends on what we're expecting when we get into the situation. Like if we're following this young kid to a city he's never been in before, he's all by himself. I've not read it, but I'm assuming that he seems like he's, a little bit young, a little bit inexperienced, but he's got these high expectations. Right. He's the chosen one in a way, it seems like. It would be great if we immediately see him, brought low from his sort of aspirations, rather than like everything kind of working out for him right from the beginning. It might be a more satisfying, place to begin his story, with this sort of high-low contrast, then everything just works out for him. Because that's not what we really expect from stories. We don't think everything's just going to work out. We're expecting conflict. We're expecting something interesting to happen instead of just finding out information about the environment around the character. Yeah.
And not just expecting it, but we want it. We want conflict and want struggle. That's why we're reading, reading the book, because we want to see the way these characters have their ups and downs and then emerge victorious in the end. That's what we want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we need to establish who this guy is, and like I said before, who his character is, what his baseline is, and kind of what the state of the world around him is here at the beginning of his story, but not in a way that feels like it's for the reader's benefit of just spouting off things about the world around him. Yeah, I don't know.
What I would have liked to see is him think he's this, hot shot, dragon affinity boy, and then he comes into the big city and not even like necessarily is rebuffed in any specific way, but just like can't actually get anything done. Like he
tries to
he doesn't really have the money to afford an inn for the night, and he doesn't really know what to do with himself, and he's like, I didn't really think this through, did I? Like, he instantly has his character arc met with reality, and he has to find a way to compensate for it and find, what to actually do with himself.
Yeah, that would be interesting. So it's a great setup, just maybe not executed as well as it could be, or maybe just, and I know that changes the story a little bit, and I don't like to make comments that change the events of the story, I guess, and I don't know what comes after this, but it seems like that would be a more satisfying baseline for this character. Like we establish he's a little bit naive, but also overconfident, and he's kind of brought low. How does he react to that situation? It tells us a lot about him, a lot more than just having him meet someone nice who shows him around, telling him things, and then gives him a place to stay for the night,
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So just an option.
So yeah.
But yeah, so a lot of interesting ideas.
For the submission.
Yeah, a lot of interesting ideas. And I know it's just the first draft, so I don't want to be too hard on anything. But yeah, interesting stuff.
And if you're listening, Michael, make it public again so I can look at it.
Yes, quite. I would like to see the rest of it too.
Yes. So, do we have anything else, or is that going to be it?
I think that's it for today. I think
we're already running a little long. Goodness me.
A little bit. Yeah.
I got to go back to work.
Oh yeah, that's right. Oh boy, this is my.
There's some PowerShell calling my name.
PowerShell. Is that a thing from Mario, or is that a computer language?
I'm not going to answer that.
We'll let you decide at home, folks. Yeah.
Post the comments.
Post in the comments what you think PowerShell is. Although I'm guessing our audience is a bunch of nerds that probably already know what that is. So yeah.
Don't insult them.
Hey, nerd is not an insult. Nerd is a badge of honor.
I'm a nerd too.
I am also a nerd. I am.
Anyways,
I am a nerd.
So, if you guys like the show and want to experience more of us, you can find us on the social medias. Most of them are just World Builders Anonymous. You can find us that way. That's like the Facebook and the Twitter and the Instagram and whatnot. On Reddit, we're WBA_podcast, and we post in various places from time to time, or you can send us a message on there as well. You can email us at WBApodcast@gmail.com. We have a website, which is www.worldbuildersanonymous.com, where we post blogs sometimes, like about once every 6 months or so, apparently. And other things as well. You can just find some stuff there that's cool.
Yeah.
And actually, one new thing, I set up a Quora page.
I don't know what that means.
A Quora account. It's like one of those places that's just like an online forum where you can ask questions and receive answers.
See, that was
I've
great.
been
That
on
was
there.
like a story setup where one character knows something and the other doesn't, and then the character who doesn't ask questions, like a fish out of water, and then you can explain what the thing is to the character who doesn't know.
How convenient. Almost as though we set it up in advance. Even though we didn't.
Even though we didn't. See, it was
But anyway,
organic. It was
so-
coming from nowhere.
Yeah, it's fine. So if you guys, I think I'm just John Gatella on there, but you think you can probably find us by searching World Builders Anonymous as well. But anyways, if you guys would like to ask a question on Quora and request an answer from us, we'll probably answer it, because that's a thing you can do.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm
cool.
hoping it'll be like a way that people can find out about us and click through to the website and stuff and then find our podcast and everything.
Nice. That's
But,
pretty cool.
that might be naive. I don't know.
Well, also, I wanted to say, if you liked the music in the beginning, I actually made that myself. I have a Instagram page called The Chipped Fiddle where I post pictures and videos and stuff as well. If any of you are interested in music, specifically like Irish/bluegrass/ any sort of fiddle playing, I try to make more posts. I'm trying to make more posts there in 2020 than I have been doing. But every once in a while I'll put something there. And if you're ever in South Carolina, I sometimes play shows as well. So that's a thing.
And in like Ireland, apparently.
Well, we're going to Ireland. Yeah, so we're going to be probably about a month without a show because, I'll be in Ireland during March and April for a little mini tour with one of my bands. It's going to be a lot of fun.
So basically, Vito gets to go to Ireland, and the only change in my life is I don't have to come out to the parking garage every week. So that's, fair, basically.
That is true. Well, when your job is playing music, it comes with its own challenges, but it definitely comes with its perks for sure.
Wish I could take a business trip to Ireland for no reason.
Next time, John, I'll pack you my suitcase.
Next time. Okay,
Anyway,
fair enough. That's it, guys.
no outro?
Bye.
Cool.
Do we have an outro? I don't know.
Usually,
Thanks
it's like,
for listening.
Usually it's an organic, thanks for listening. We'll see you next week. Bye. And then you say bye.
Maybe we
after
should
me.
try again.
Okay, let's try it. Let's try it again. Okay.
Thanks for listening, everyone. We're really thankful for you, and thank you also, and also thank you.
It sucked. That's all. It sucked.
Oh.
Just we'll see you next week. Okay, bye.
Bye, guys.
This show is sponsored in part by Audible. Visit worldbuildersanonymous.com/audible to check out what the guys are listening to right now and to receive a free audiobook.